Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another weekend evening. Me, Monica Guzman, talking about American history and American baseball history. So, given that we're coming up on Independence Day 2021, I've decided to go ahead and do a bunch of streams leading into a wonderful holiday for Americans. And I'm actually going to attempt to stream live every night this week in the evening leading up to Independence Day 2021. And we'll see if I can keep up. It's going to require some stamina on my part, possibly some endurance. Let's see if I can manage it. There's definitely plenty of content leading up to this wonderful day in American history that Americans today just don't appreciate enough anymore. And it's a little bit uh, it's a little bit scary. So if you're someone who participates in online debates, discussions, if you're actively searching for information online, you are someone who's proactive. And you're probably someone who is a self-starter either by nature or you became that way. And so you are part of the choir at that point. Like myself, I'm part of the choir, right? Um, and then there's everybody else. Then there is everybody else who, for whatever reason, isn't a self-starter, isn't out there actively searching for information, trying to figure out what's going on to this country or even in the world. And so it's a question of how do you reach those people, and then how do you speak in a manner that lets them know we're on the same side, we have similar interests and beliefs, morals, ethics, and then it's how do you convey that they can trust you, because we know that power corrupts. And again, that's my issue with the current groups that are trying to set up movements. It always ends up being a power grab. It just, you look at history and it always ends up devolving into a group of people who want to be masters of the universe or whatever they want to call themselves, right? It always devolves that way. We've seen it with individuals and we see it with groups, and especially for some reason on the right. The right is just up for the taking all the time, because as you see with these GoFundMe campaigns, the right is extremely giving. Somebody raised $350,000 somewhere in California to help a restaurant out. Who do you think was donating to that fund? Do you think it was the stingy left, or do you think it was the American right? Um, and then we've seen it with just other campaigns. The American right is extremely giving. And because of that, you get taken advantage of by people who want power, they want attention, they've got some sort of grudge that they are carrying out on the popular kids, the jocks, the cheerleaders, the prom king and queen, the homecoming king and queen, whatever the case might be. And so I am definitely not pro movements. I am still in on MAGA because Make America Great Again was Donald Trump's thing, an individual. Make America Great Again was never a centralized movement. It was decentralized. Participate if you want, attend the rallies if you want, watch the rallies online if you want. It was never a centralized movement like a lot of the stuff that people are trying to put together right now and in the last several years, and obviously in the future they're going to continue trying that out. It never goes well. People always find out at the end that the whole time they were actually funded by the enemy or the people trying to keep you down. And so I'm just a big decentralized, do your thing, get together in groups based on a common interest. And then when someone goes sideways or someone turns out to be the FBI or someone turns out to be some sort of infiltrator, then you kick them out of the group. It's far easier to get a handle on something like that when the group is small as opposed to once you reach 100. I think it's way more difficult to sniff out the FBI at that point. Whomever's infiltrating, I don't know if the CIA infiltrates too, but we know the FBI is hanging out several Americans to dry right now. People have to be careful. You really have to know who you're following. You need to know your neighbors. You need to know within your group, you need to know each other. You need to get to know each other just to prevent the right ending up victims over and over again of people who are just trying to keep America down. Okay, so tonight's topic is still leading into Independence Day 2021, and I'm going to talk about Thomas Jefferson. Now, Thomas Jefferson is probably the most impactful American historical figure. I mean, I was reviewing all this stuff for tonight, and I'm just like, dude, there is no way I can do Thomas Jefferson justice, especially in under an hour. And just everything he wrote, everything he invented, all his accomplishments as they weren't politicians back then. They were just men leading. They were leaders. They were probably the most authentic leaders that America has had. And so I'm definitely going to talk about the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. It's super important. Again, because I don't know what kids are learning these days in school. My assumption is that they're not learning American history. Definitely not to the extent that I learned it. And part of it is I learned American history to the point that I did because I did take advanced placement and I passed. And I've got a great story. Let me tell it. So my my advanced placement American history teacher was an amazing man. I believe he passed away several years ago from prostate cancer, which is extremely sad because this man was outstanding. He was a poet, and I think he loved our class the most from others he had before us, and definitely the ones that came after us. We were pretty special. We were, like I've talked about before, like we were the top in our class. There were about 30 of us that went through the majority of high school together because we were separated from the general population, because we were in AP classes and honors classes, and we were extremely involved in school. We were in the newspaper, we were cheerleaders, we were football players, we were in the tech clubs, we were dance. We did, what else do we have? We had softball players, we had basketball players, we had band members. So we were like awesome. And okay, so my junior year of high school, I was extremely involved in several activities, and my school principal was extremely worried that I was overextending myself. And then I had my teachers who felt the same way, especially my English teacher. She was kind of shrewdish. But I'm gonna be honest, I didn't get a lot from the English classes, but at least not I believe that was my sophomore year. Didn't get a lot from there. I definitely got a lot from my English teacher my freshman year. He was another poet. Again, I went to a public school. We were like 90% Mexican. We had a sprinkling of a couple Africans. We had a really awesome African track star. We had maybe some other Latinos. Maybe we were 95% Mexican. And the school did not have a lot of resources. We did a lot of fundraising. We sold a lot of chocolate bars, a lot of lollipops. It was a great experience. Maybe that's what made me. Okay, so my junior year of high school, the administration and my teachers felt that I was overextending myself, and they were worried about my performance on my advanced placement exams. And my AP history teacher used to quiz us. He had all the presidents' pictures up and the years that they served, and he would quiz us. And I admit I did not study for those quizzes. Probably don't know the order of the presidents to this day. But what he promised us was anybody who passed the AP exam and did not get an A would have their grade bumped up an entire grade. And let's just say that because I didn't do well on my quizzes, I did not have an A at the end of the year, but I passed my AP history exam, so I ended up with an A. So I'm sorry, I think I'm pretty awesome. And you guys will see that it's not narcissism, but it's just a confidence that I have, and I believe I prove my competence. And I guess maybe I have had doubters, and I actually appreciate those who underestimate me, because it's fun to see your reactions right now, seeing that I've stuck with what I'm doing and that I'm proving my opinions and my assumptions. So it's fun seeing your guys' reactions right now. And I'm just getting started. I'm not scratching the surface anymore. I'm definitely in the thick of things. And now it's just about getting everything out of my brain and explaining it, again, in a manner that reaches people beyond the choir. We've got to reach beyond the choir. So my story is I passed my AP exam and I got my grade bumped up because I didn't study as much as I did for the pub quizzes. And my AP history teacher he may have been homosexual, but at that time, it wasn't this flamboyant clapback culture of homosexuals. I think you guys the homosexuals of today are like that Harvey gay dude. Wasn't he like super flamboyant? I can tell you that my AP history teacher, if he was homosexual, he never was flamboyant about it. And he was a poet. He was a great man. He really cared about us. And again, I did not go to a high school that had tons of resources. We made do with what we have. Like I said, we sold a lot of candy bars and a lot of lollipops. Everyone had to fundraise. The football players, the cheerleaders, the dancers, student government, and yet turned out okay. And other people can turn out okay. I guess maybe the separator between like my high school and other high schools is that we didn't have violence. There were no like shootings. We didn't have metal detectors. At that time, they had fences, but it wasn't anywhere near like what it is today. And some of you have probably experienced in like Chicago and stuff like that. So I don't know what I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not here to solve people's problems. I'm here to encourage you to solve your own problems. And I want you to know that it can be done. You just got to be proactive. You might have to get a little creative. Definitely have to walk a straight line, but it can be done. So Thomas Jefferson passed away on 4th of July, 1826. I'll double check that. But again, I was at 1826, right? One of the greatest founding fathers passed away on Independence Day. How insane is that? And there was another one. Is it James Madison that also passed away on 4th of July? I mean, it's just, so what I was trying to get to before I, one of my tangents. So there's those of us who are proactive, and there are probably others who are outliers like myself. And then there's everybody else. The rest of the population makes up the chunk of the bell curve, right? So I have a really great example that I found that I'm going to demonstrate to explain the bell curve. The chunk of the population lies on the meat of the bell curve. So if you roll a dice, you take note of the number of times that you're going to roll. If you're using 2 dice, I believe is the example. So the number of times you can roll 7, the number of times you're going to roll 5. And so the more combinations that make up specific numbers is the reason why we can make assumptions in the absence of data. So the majority of the population falls, they're neither proactive nor reactive. They're just kind of there. And these are the people that I've realized learn everything that they know. Like they consciously learned how to walk. It was a conscious effort to learn math. It was a conscious effort to learn how to read. It wasn't something that they picked up on their own. And it's a little bit scary because anybody else who realizes that and is a power hungry, I mean, who's really power hungry, evil people, losers, grudge holders, that kind of power in the wrong hands is scary. And, but nonetheless, it's there for the taking, right? And so, so everything is learned. That means that the majority of Americans today don't know the greatness of Thomas Jefferson, don't know the greatness of Ben Franklin, don't know the greatness of James Madison, don't know the greatness of America, the country, don't understand the perils that pilgrims went through, given that they landed in a country that had no infrastructure. Nothing, they had nothing. They learned everything. But they learned to survive. That was a survival thing. It wasn't learning to appreciate what you have. It was learning to survive. Completely different, right? So again, we have to be able to reach the people that didn't learn American history. And I still believe to this day that you can build a curriculum just on American history. Like, this isn't the book. So I purchased a couple copies of this book, right? And this isn't the book where I have tons of notes, and I took note of like the first American novel. I took note of the music. I took note of all the culture stuff. I took note of everything. Again, everything that you need to know is you can build a curriculum off of American history. And I would use this specific version of the book to do it. So, the greatness of Thomas Jefferson. Let's talk a little bit about that. And I closed the book and I lost my place. So I'm going to talk about the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. And as you saw, if you watched my Patrick Henry live stream from yesterday, did you notice how many times he mentioned God, or he alluded to a higher being? So that was common during the Thomas Jefferson era. George Washington, in his Thanksgiving proclamation, continually gave thanks to God, right? So as scientific as Thomas Jefferson was, as scientific as Ben Franklin was, there was an acknowledgement of a higher being. So now, they didn't necessarily believe in Christian God. Now, this is a time when Puritanism was pedal to the metal, right? Like, Puritanism died off, right? Christianity continued, but the Puritan form of religion died off because it was just way too hardcore. Again, the English, you guys brought drinking to the country. You guys are big drinkers. The Irish are big drinkers. That's your cultural thing. There's no reason to tiptoe around it. It's just a fact, right? And so the colonists didn't give up drinking. And so, right, there was a rebellion against prohibition. But drinking, I can live with people drinking over people smoking pot. I don't want to smell you. I think you are a degenerate. If you're out there stinking up the place, I don't want to smell you. I don't want to know that you're smoking pot and murdering your brain cells. If you want to do that, do it. But I don't want to know it and I don't want to smell it. So I'm super against the legalization of degeneracy, which is continually happening. I'm pretty sure MLB, under the guidance of Robert Manfred, who is not an American, is still out there trying to legalize sports gambling at the federal level. And I want to remind you once again that American A.G. Spalding got rid of gambling at baseball games because he believed that it victimizes the population. Difference between an American and a non-American. So, okay. So, deism is something that guided some of the founding fathers. So again, they weren't hardcore Christians, but they weren't atheists. They knew that there was a higher being out there. They knew, again, Thomas Jefferson, we derive our rights from the Creator. We do not get our rights from man, because once you get your rights from man, man has power over you. And the whole reason for declaring independence, for the Constitution, for the Bill of Rights, was that so to prevent men from ruling over each other, which we are ruled by men, right? Non-American men have taken over American institutions, American corporations, the economy, the government, and all the little related things that go with all that. Right now, we are ruled by men, the complete opposite of what the founders established. So, deism. So, Jefferson and Franklin embraced liberal doctrines of deism that Paine promoted. Thomas Paine, right? Um, deists relied on reason rather than revelation, on science rather than the Bible. They rejected the concept of original sin and denied Christ's divinity. Yet, deists believed in a supreme being who had created a knowable universe and endowed human beings with the capacity for moral behavior. Super important, super a concept that you need to drill into your head, because what's happening right now is not moral behavior. We are not led by moral men. We are not led into moral behavior. Legalizing gambling, legalizing substances that people end up abusing. Sorry, that's the opposite of the intention of the founding fathers, which is why you're not taught about them anymore. You're taught about, I guess, Aztecs, gods, and African voodoo, and whatever else is out there that's being promoted. And you've got to realize that it's not just promoted in schools, it's promoted in the culture. I watched a lot of TV, and I've streamed a lot of stuff that I didn't watch on TV. And one of the shows that I watched was Girls. And so we know that Lena Dunham isn't an American. That's why the show is basically soft porn. And she basically ends the show with girls walking into some sort of black magic shop in New York City, and they're buying contraptions because they're wishing for, what was it, an apartment in New York City, an income, some sort of success, probably love. Can't remember because it's been a minute since I've watched it. But so this stuff is promoted to girls through the culture as well. And so completely different from believing in a supreme being who endowed humans with the capacity for moral behavior. So I want to talk about also Thomas Jefferson and the Supreme Court, because New Jersey, I haven't heard anything since the representative from New Jersey came out and stated that they want to expand the Supreme Court, and we all know why they want to do it. So for me, if New Jersey succeeds in expanding the Supreme Court, that is officially delegitimizing the Supreme Court. And again, Thomas Jefferson had issues with the Supreme Court. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Because if we're faced with New Jersey expanding the Supreme Court, and we know why they're doing it, and we also know that they're erasing America one law at a time. Again, Robert Manfred, not an American, guiding MLB, is trying to legalize sports gambling at the federal level, when you have American A.G. Spalding in the early 1900s stating specifically that gambling needed to be eradicated from American baseball because it victimizes population. Okay, so again, difference in cultures. American culture worried about American citizens. Non-American culture doesn't give a rat's ass about the health of American citizens on American soil. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson threatens the supremacy of the Supreme Court. So, a Supreme Court justice by the name of Samuel Chase was some sort of anti-Republican activist, Supreme Court member that gave Jefferson all sorts of problems. Early in 1804, impeachment charges against Chase were voted by the House of Representatives, which then passed the question of guilt or innocence onto the Senate. The indictment by the House was based on high crimes and misdemeanors as specified in the Constitution. Yet the evidence was plain that the intemperate judge had not been guilty of high crimes, but of manners, injudicious statements, and unrestrained partisanship. The Senate, after a determined prosecution, failed to muster enough votes to convict and remove Chase. The president thus established was fortunate. From that day to this, no really serious attempt has been made to reshape the Supreme Court by the impeachment weapon. So I feel like I've heard people toss out there the impeachment of judges. You can do it. You can do it. John Marshall viewed the attack on Chase with deep misgivings. He suspected, not unreasonably, that if it succeeded, he would be next, and then his other Federalist colleagues. These fears were now laid to rest. Jefferson's ill-advised attempt at judge breaking was a reassuring victory for the independence of the judiciary and for the separation of powers among the three branches of the federal government. Nonetheless, it has been tried to impeach Supreme Court judges. It's out there. So Thomas Jefferson was not a fan of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has had issues since 1804. If New Jersey moves to expand it, that is surefire grounds to declare the Supreme Court illegitimate. They should have never ruled against freedom of religion on American soil. America was founded by Christians, led by the patriarchy, yet in 1862 and 1863, a Jewish man and an atheist were successful in the removal of Bible study from public schools and prayer in public schools. The beginning, I believe the beginning of the downfall of America started in the early 1900s with World War I and then followed by World War II. But the 1960s just were like another nail in the coffin, right? Okay. So again, a lot of my historical stuff comes directly from this book. I recommend you guys find it at your favorite thrift store, your favorite secondhand store. I believe this one came from a Goodwill. I believe. Let me see if it has the markings. One of these had markings. Yeah, Goodwill. That tag, Goodwill. This one came from Goodwill too. I highly recommend it. So Thomas Jefferson was born April 13th, 1743, passed away 4th of July, 1826. He's described as an American statesman, diplomat, lawyer, someone added slaveholder, architect, musician, philosopher, and founding father who served as the third president of the United States of America. He was previously vice president, proponent of democracy, anti-federalist. Now, Thomas Jefferson is also described as just again, he's up there with the most important founding fathers. I mean, you can do like, I mean, it's a toss up, right, between Washington, Franklin, Madison, and Jefferson. But Jefferson is remembered for the Louisiana land purchase. He had a lot to do with expanding the territory, right? And okay, so have any of you ever watched Family Ties? So that's when on TV when I was growing up, because we only had like 3 channels, and that was one of the shows that was on, and I watched it. It was all right, but once I picked up one of the streaming services that's out there, I was able to watch it from start to finish. And in one of the episodes, Mallory has to take a history exam, and she's having a lot of trouble. And one of the questions that she's asked was based on Thomas Jefferson. And the answer was that Thomas Jefferson struggled with a specific decision because he was pro-rights versus state rights, and Thomas Jefferson was always an advocate of states' rights. And I was like, oh my gosh. When I watched that episode, I was like, I learned American history, but I didn't learn it that well. And I was just like, oh my God, like, so that show, I was young when that show released, and I was like, okay, so American history had already taken a tick down, because again, my history teacher was awesome, but I'm not sure if he specifically told us. I don't think I could have given that kind of answer, but okay. But now I'm doing my best to bulk up on that stuff, bulk up on that knowledge. So 55 words that Thomas Jefferson ended up inserting in the Declaration of Independence are described as the 55 most important words in any American founding document. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. 55 words, possibly the most important 55 words that summarize what is America. Give me 1 second. Okay. So Thomas Jefferson gets slammed because he was a slave owner. Okay, well, so was George Washington. I don't know if Ben Franklin owned any slaves. I don't know if James Madison owned slaves, Thomas Paine, John Locke. But okay, that was the thing back then, right? It was the way things were. And so I did watch The View when Barbara Walters was still there. It was definitely far more intelligent at that point. And I stopped watching. I'm not sure if I stopped watching because Barbara Walters left. Not that she's innocent and unbiased, right? But it was something to watch at that point, so I did. I remember when Whoopi Goldberg, so I believe I watched several shows with her on. I believe she was a permanent fixture at that point. And I remember Whoopi Goldberg saying that as an African, she felt like she always had her bags packed. So she stated that she never felt fully American. And okay, I get it. If they're going to hang on to slavery and oh my God, slavery, then yeah, you know what? Africans are never going to successfully integrate into American life. They could have been well integrated at this point, but they've chosen not to, or at least the leadership of several African communities have chosen to continue playing the victim card. And therefore, you've got Africans turning their back on the national anthem and holding up Black Power signs, even though they're supposed to be representing the American flag and the American country, which is just ridiculous at this point. I mean, they're really going to go back to the 1960s and protest all over again. Like, that's so fucking lame. I mean, really, like, in a day and age where the ratings for these kinds of events are already in the toilet, you guys want to get to as close to zero as possible, right? But okay, I have a solution to all of that I will share later on next year. And it doesn't involve getting into war, and it doesn't involve getting into any fights. It just involves restarting America. So, okay, so Whoopi Goldberg felt like she always has, I don't know if she still feels like she has her legs packed, but she doesn't feel fully American. Okay. I believe that Oprah said the same thing, and I believe Will Smith said something similar. I mean, there's nothing we can do to help them, right? Like, I don't feel that way. Like, I don't know. But okay, whatever. So, Independence, the draft, is described as the second most important core document of the founding of America. The draft of the Declaration of Independence is dated July 2nd through July 4th, 1776. And we know that the reason for that kind of dating is because back then they traveled by horse, they didn't have the internet. Did they have telegrams at that point? I don't believe so, right? So communication among the delegates took a lot longer at that point, right? Getting approval, edits and stuff like that. It just took a long time. And then you've got Thomas Jefferson listening to the delegates, and then he's got to figure out how to put all this into a cohesive document, right? And so I included the link to this ebook that you can pick up too. It's free. That link isn't an affiliate link. You don't have to worry about that. It's, for me right now, again, it's just about spreading information, helping you guys pick and choose, but just pick something, right? Read what you want to read, but read something. And there's a lot of free ebooks right now, possibly because Independence Day is around the corner. I know it's Amazon and I know it's Kindle, but it's free. So, we have to pick our battles, right? Okay, so let me read to you how the draft of the Declaration of Independence is described. Nowhere were the novel and transcendental implications of the Declaration so visible as in Jefferson's attempt to include a denunciation of slavery. I've mentioned several times on Twitter that there was an effort to end slavery before America was established, but they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it because you had You had some colonists who relied on the slavery for their economic, gain, but they also helped the rest of the colonies too. So it wasn't a wealth thing per se, it was an economic thing. Um, the Second Continental Congress received a draft of the Declaration from Jefferson that made the British rejection of the petition submitted by the First Continental Congress to end the slave trade one of the grounds for severing ties. So I understand why Africans would say that they feel like they have their bags packed. They don't feel fully American. And if you're reading this and you're African, I guess you're going to feel bad about being African on American soil. And that's one of the reasons why, if you remain on that mindset, you are hurting yourself. And then the question obviously becomes, why are you still here? Africa is expansive. There's tons of opportunity over there. It's sunny over there all the time, right? So you guys could benefit from some sort of solar project. And apparently there's some sort of infrastructure already there that just needs a couple of intelligent Africans to take the project from concept to reality. So there's so much opportunity for you. I don't understand why you choose to be self-masochists and continue living in misery, and then you drag everything down with you. Like, we can't enjoy the Olympics. African athletes are going to do their Black Power stuff. We enjoy, well, I don't watch NBA. So that's African, right? The NFL, post Tom Brady, who knows what that's going to look like. MLB, they do their best to push forward African athletes, but Africans and baseball just don't go hand in hand. Baseball is a high IQ sport, and the average African IQ is in the 60s, and the average American IQ is 98. And Ty Cobb, Cy Young, Cap Anson, Christy Mathewson, Honus Wagner, Walter Johnson, Babe Ruth were all high IQ men. And so what I'm trying to say is those guys' IQ was definitely higher than a lot of your guys' IQ today. I'm talking about Americans. You guys on video games, smoking pot, damaging your sperm's DNA. Babe Ruth was smarter than you guys, more intelligent. Those are just facts. So, but again, MLB right now is still working very hard to push forward African heroes, which you're never going to measure up to the American baseball pioneers. You probably will match up to your Negro League pioneers, and that's cool. But at that point, hopefully we'll have something going so you guys can do your thing, and then the rest of us can do our thing. So, whatever, right? Okay, so Americans chose Americans. The colonists chose colonists over Africans. Slaves. Lincoln did the same thing. Lincoln didn't fight the Civil War to free the slaves. I think we all know that now, right? Are we all on the same page at this point? I don't think it's like telling you that Santa Claus doesn't exist, right? Like, have we all grown up and do we know this? I think so, right? Okay. So, are you shocked? are you shocked that the colonists chose the colonists over the African slaves? I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. But there was an attempt. They tried, and they tried. They did the best they could. Obviously, bringing Africans to America in the first place was the biggest mistake ever. And they did try to rectify it. In 1812, there was an effort to start shipping Africans back to Africa, but some didn't want to leave. And then some of them got there and were like, dude, these dudes are uncivilized. So you rejected your own. Again, it's so many problems. Like, why should I even be like addressing this stuff? Like, it's your problem. It's not my problem. You guys need to figure it out in your own community. I wish Candace Owens the best of luck. It's a long road though. But best of luck. Hopefully you've got God on your side and he'll help you out as you need it. Okay, so continuing with the draft of the Declaration of Independence, written by or put together by Thomas Jefferson with the help of the delegates. However, in order not to offend the sensibilities of the delegates from Georgia and South Carolina, the Congress elected to omit Jefferson's denunciation of slavery from the final declaration. So why does the 1% of the population residing on American soil teamed up with 12% of the population residing on American soil? Why are they going after some American cities so hard? Atlanta. So for me, with this Juneteenth stuff, so Juneteenth is the African version of Independence Day on American soil, right? My educated guess is that they're going to try to make Atlanta their capital. So let's say somehow Americans lie on their back, roll over, and play dead. I believe Juneteenth would become their official Independence Day, and they would turn Atlanta into their capital to replace DC. I mean, the siege on DC is happening already, right? BLM Plaza and that mayor, and they're trying to make it the 51st state and all that jazz. So, guys, got a sense of urgency, you guys. Sense of urgency. You cannot keep smoking your pot. You cannot keep playing your video games. You got to get some muscle on you. You've got to get some healthy diet in you. You've got to get some critical thinking in your brain. You've got to shape up, dudes. You've got to shape up. No more children in suits. You don't have a lot of value. You got to do your blue collar jobs. You got to work the land. Trust me. The reason why MLB is not American baseball is because you got children wearing MLB uniforms as opposed to the where you had men wearing American baseball uniforms. Okay, let me bring this up now. What's happening with Cody Bellinger? So I understand he's a stoner. Reminder, MLB stopped suspending players who smoke pot. Robert Manfred, not an American, trying to legalize sports gambling at the federal level, even though American AG Spalding specifically banned it because it victimizes the population. So obviously, if Robert Manfred, not an American, legalized pot smoking in MLB, then you've got a lot more stoner players wearing MLB uniforms. And I believe Cody is one of them. I'm not sure if Chris Taylor's another stoner. That's actually another reason why I've backed off of Chris Taylor. Get off the pot, dude. Not the toilet. Get off the substance. You don't need it. I mean, were you smoking in 2017 when you had your MVP season? Okay, hopefully not. But there are people expressing concern over Cody Bellinger. He doesn't look as healthy as he did a few years ago. And I want to express my surprise given the family that he comes from. So his dad was a baseball player for the Yankees. His dad's a champion. But his dad's like the what's it called? I don't even remember now. The guy that didn't play very often because he couldn't hit right-handed batting, for example. The platoon guy. I guess he might have been a platoon guy. Or just not an everyday player. So Cody's dad is a former baseball player, current firefighter, right? And I believe the family has a religious foundation. So I'm really shocked if Cody is losing the war to drugs. Pot is a drug. I'm concerned for Cody. What's his free agency going to look like? What shape is going to look like next year? And by bringing this up, obviously it gives other teams something to think about, but we also have to worry about Cody's well-being. That's what family's for, to intervene in situations like this. So hopefully Cody's family, and hopefully you're looking out for him. Okay, so let's go back to Thomas Jefferson. As Jefferson's notes report, Northern delegates also smarted under the censure of slavery because though their people have very few slaves themselves, yet they have been pretty considerable carriers of them to others. So everyone's admitting their guilt over slavery, which everyone knows, even they knew back then. Huge mistake. Bringing Africans to colonial soil was the biggest mistake ever, right? We're living through the ramifications of that mistake. They acknowledged it back then. No amount of apologizing is going to take this away. But the thing is, this isn't an African country. This is an American country, 60%, 66% from England. Then you got your Scots, your Welsh, your Irish, German, French, and then others. Okay, so they're admitting their guilt. They're admitting their guilt, but they did try to do something about it. Okay, so we suggest that the inclusion of such an indictment would have had a profound impact on the continuing American conversation about rights. In Jefferson's notes on the debate in Congress over the Declaration, he gives a short account of how the Declaration was amended. Afterwards, recopying that first draft to show what he originally proposed. This memoir is found in the 9-volume collection, The Writings of Thomas Jefferson, which was authorized for publication in 1853 by Congress. And that's something that I haven't read. Thomas Jefferson has an autobiography, and I can tell you that I lean toward autobiographies more than biographies, just because so many people have so many biases, and I'm all about the first source documents at this time. That's why I've read like Christy Mathewson's book, A.G. Spalding's book, Cap Anson's book. It sounds like Babe Ruth had some sort of autobiography out there. I haven't come across it yet, but I'm looking for it. So first source documents all the way, you guys. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Congress proceeded the same day to consider the Declaration of Independence, which had been reported and laying on the table the Friday preceding, and on Monday referred to a committee of the whole. The Polsci anonymous idea that we had friends in England worth keeping terms with still haunted the minds of many. For this reason, those passages which conveyed censures of the people of England were struck out lest they should give them offense. Okay, so here we go. So South Carolina and Georgia, who had never attempted to restrain the importation of slaves and who, on the contrary, still wished to continue it. Our northern brethren also, I believe, felt a little tender under those censures, for though their people have very few slaves themselves, yet they have been pretty considerable carriers of them to others. The debates, having taken up the greater parts of the early part of July through 4th of July, in the evening of the last close, the declaration was reported by the committee, agreed to by the House, and signed by every member present except Mr. Dickinson. As the sentiments of men are known not only by what they receive, but what they reject also, I will state the form of the declaration as originally reported. The parts struck out by Congress shall be distinguished by a black line drawn under them, and those inserted by them shall be placed in the margin in a concurrent column. Okay, so Whoopi Goldberg, other African community leaders on American soil feel that they never truly became Americans. They feel like their bags were always packed. And I mean, it's been several decades since the end of the Civil War, since Africans were given the right to vote, since Africans were given American citizenship, yet this the communities not feeling like they are American continues. And what's the solution? I mean, what's the solution? You guys have to figure that out for yourselves. Like, the rest of us just don't want to get dragged down into this anymore. We're raising families and we're trying to deflate the economy, and we're trying to put America back together. Like, people are trying not to get shot by flying bullets in Chicago and stabbings in Oregon and Portland, right? I mean, you guys have to figure this out. Do you want to stay, or do you want to, like, because the Olympic stuff, people aren't going to tolerate it anymore. I don't know what the ratings were the last time around, but given that there's a lot more degeneracy among our Olympic athletes, Americans just, they're not into it. So you've got to figure this stuff out because Americans are tuning it out. Thomas Jefferson did his best. In the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson did his best to end the practice of slavery. He was outnumbered. They chose their own people over the slaves, and it was a huge mistake to bring you to this land. Would you eventually have made your way here? We don't know, because the Africans who travel here, I mean, they're brought here, right? Barack Obama basically airlifted a lot of Africans, right, to America during his tenure. I don't know if you guys had the mindset to do what the Pilgrims did and get in boats and sail the seas and find your way here. I don't know if, I mean, do you guys think you had that? Like, I don't think so. I don't think this many Africans would have ended up in America had it not been for the slave trade. I just, like, the Jewish community in Hollywood doesn't understand why landing on the moon was so important to Americans. They don't understand why winning is so important to Americans. They don't understand why keeping score is so important to Americans. And neither does the Jewish community in MLB, right? Like, right, I know when I was watching the Baseball Hating Network and listening to what used to be LA Dodger games and the radio, over and over, I kept hearing, winning's not important. Sorry, competition's about winning. So winning, the concept of winning is specific to Americans and not everybody else. Like, I don't know if the French take winning as seriously. I don't know if the Italians take winning as seriously. The Germans, but Americans take winning seriously. That's why Americans have always come home with stacks of gold medals. But tonight is about Thomas Jefferson, and I will probably bring in more Thomas Jefferson as the week goes. Again, my goal is to test my stamina, to test my endurance. I will be streaming at least an hour every day this week, leading up to Independence Day 2021, covering American history pertaining to the founding documents, the founding fathers, and why this country, with its one wart, is still awesome. It's worth restarting. It's worth celebrating. It's worth being proud of. I mean, if you qualify to be like a daughter of the American Revolution, how awesome is that? That is an amazing legacy. But I met someone, and she was approaching 30, childless, white as snow, total Marxist, qualified to be a daughter of the American Revolution, and she rejected it. And I mean, obviously that's her choice, but that's what the American population, the white American population, that's your thing, right? That you've got to figure out. And so let me leave you with the greatest 55 words in the founding of America. And then I will wish you a good rest of your night. And I will see you back here tomorrow. I'm going to aim for 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to talk more American history. So the most famous 55 words, the most important 55 words for America. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Consent of the governed, super, super, super important concept. Super, super important concept that I will be talking a little bit more about this week leading up to Independence Day 2021. So thank you again to those who catch the video, pick up portions of the video to watch. I appreciate you lending me your ear. I've definitely have gotten better at this. And I'm gearing up for possibly August, the latest September for an official launch. I don't know how much I'm gonna put into the actual production of it. The content is what's truly important to me. I need to get the content out there. So thank you again. Hope you have a good night. Hope you have a wonderful Monday. I will see you guys back here tomorrow, Monday evening, 9 o'clock. Thank you again.